Genesis 11:27 through 12:9. This is the account of Terah's family line. Terah became the father of Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran became the father of Lot. While his father Terah was still alive, Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans, in the land of his birth. Abram and Nahor both married. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of both Milcah and Iscah. Now, Sarai was childless because she was not able to conceive. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Terah lived 205 years, and then he died in Haran. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. All people on the earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on toward the hills, east of Bethel, and pitched his tent. With Bethel on the west and Ai on the east, there he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. And then Abram set out and continued toward Negev. This is narrative. And we're going to approach it a little differently than we have approached the epistles, the letters that we've been looking at. And we're going to appreciate the fact that what we're reading is a story. And so each week, and right now I'm talking primarily to life group leaders, but life group leaders, I would encourage you to go through this video actually with your life groups this week. So life group leaders, just because the handout's going to change, it's going to look like this from now on, at least while we're in Genesis, I would ask you to go through this with your life group. This is called a story arc. And it basically gives us a way of unpacking stories. And there's arguments on how story arcs should look, but generally speaking, this is a good idea. And what you have is your intro over here, right? And you have your conclusion over here. Conclusion. And right up here you have the climax of the story. And a story is never really just linear like this. It's actually wavy. There are all these ups and downs as it builds to the pinnacle. And what we're going to do with this is basically mark each point that we see something that's giving us introductory information, or those series of events that build or add tension, right? And we'll mark those as well. And each of those in and of itself is its own little arc. It's its own little story. And therefore, those little moments, they have lessons for us. And those lessons all build into the ultimate lesson, which is found here at the climax of the story, where all of the pieces come together, where the big decisions are made, where the big impacts happen. And then you have your falling action after that into a conclusion, which, again, is actually just going to build up and towards more tension, right? And so that's all that we're doing here. Whoa, I just lost everything. Oops, but that's okay. I'm going to erase all of this anyway. That's just the format that we're going to use in the coming weeks, because it helps us kind of follow the story and learn the lessons along the way. So, redraw that. So, let's begin with the introduction. And so we're going to mark that, and we're going to say chapter 11, and we're going to go from all the way from verse 27 through 32. Let's go back up and look at those verses. This is the account of Terah's family line. So this is really the intro into this whole section. Right here. Actually, well, that's not quite right. How about this? We'll go and we'll just do verse 27 for the intro. And the intro here is Terah and Abram's background. And it doesn't really add tension, it just sets the scene. So let's see what we got here. It begins with this. This is the account of Terah's family line. So the story of Abraham's call begins not with Abraham, but with Terah. Again, backstory, right? In his family line. And what we get in here is this. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran became the father of Lot. And, just maybe to help ourselves out, why don't we draw this out? We got Terah up here, and he has 3 sons. Abraham, Nahor, and Lot. Not Lot. Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. And it's probably actually in this order where Haran would be the oldest, Nahor the middle child, and Abram the youngest. There's just a good possibility of that. Anyways, we'll move forward. Haran became the father of Lot. So Haran has the child Lot. He also has, if we look down here, Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of both Milcah and Iscah. So if we were to take Haran Haran himself has 3 kids. He has Lot, he has Milcah, and he has, where's the other one? And Iscah. All right. And what happens is that while his father Terah was still alive, Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans. So we'll go back down to the bottom here. And this is still kind of in the intro, but it's a little bit further down. The tension is building. 11:28. Haran dies, right? And that's a big deal. Because for Abram, that's his big brother, right? And now Lot is going to grow up without a father, which might explain why Abraham, who has no children, right? No kids. It might explain why he and Lot have such a connection in life. So again, backstory. But the second piece we learn here is that Haran died in Ur of the Chaldeans. And this is important because that statement, Ur of the Chaldeans, gets an equivalent in the land of his birth. So Haran, Nahor, and Abram all come from Ur of the Chaldeans. That's where they all grew up. Now he continues. Abram and Nahor, that's the other 2 brothers, not Haran. Haran's dead now. Both married. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. So, wrong way. Let's go back up here. So Nahor marries his niece, Milcah, and Abram marries Sarai, which we find out later is actually his stepsister. This is another one of Terah's children, but by another woman. So for us today, that makes things weird, but for them, it wasn't nearly as weird. We're a couple hundred years after the flood, and it's not as big of a deal. So anyways, that means that Terah has now 2 sons. He's got a line going through Abraham and a line going through Nahor. The land, this one, Abram, Sarai, and Lot, they all go to Canaan. Well, start going to Canaan anyway. It seems that Nahor stays behind. So let's take a look. The name of Abraham's wife was Sarai. The name of Nahor was Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of both Milcah and Iscah. Now, Sarai was childless because she was not able to conceive, right? No kids. Let's go back down to the bottom. So the tensions really begin to build with this point. 11:30. Sarai is barren. Okay? That is a big deal throughout not just chapter 11, but all of Genesis. Over and over, we're going to see that the women are barren and that they are promised sons, and God delivers in big ways. So even that's a big deal. All right, let's continue. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. So Nahor stays, right? So we'll go back up to the top. The second son stays in Ur. And then Abraham, Sarai, and Lot all go with Terah to, they set out for Canaan, but they don't make it there. Together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan, but when they came to Haran, they settled there. And if we should be asking ourselves why. Why did they settle in Haran, right? It's a good question. And then going back down to the bottom, we would just say, here's the next point right here. They leave for Canaan. Leave for Canaan. And then settle in Haran. And that would be verse 31. And, we can ask ourselves again, why did he do that? Maybe he stopped in Haran because it has the same name as his son. Maybe he stopped in Haran because in Haran they worshipped the moon, as they did in Ur of the Chaldeans. And maybe the dad here, Terah, doesn't want to go away from a moon worshipping place. In the New Testament, we find out that Abram, let me slow down. Maybe that's why. But for whatever, maybe the journey was hard. Maybe dad's just old. We don't know immediately from the story why they settled there. The next line is Terah lived for 205 years and then he died in Haran. Now, this is really important. Right here is the Lord had said to Abram. Had said. This is past tense. It's not like then the Lord said. It is the Lord had said to Abraham. This means this happened before dad died in Haran. And before this, the Lord had said, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. Now, we know that that is Canaan. What this means is that God came to Abram while he still lived in Ur. That was his country, where his people were, and where his father's household was. God appeared to him while he lived in Ur and said, go to Canaan. But when he went, his father, Terah, said, okay, we're going to go. But Terah stopped in Haran. And Abram, like a good son, didn't abandon his father there. Instead, he stayed with his father until his father passed away, and then he continues the journey. Continues to go to Canaan. And this is what God had spoken to him. He said, go from your country, your people, your father's household to the land I will show you. We know it's Canaan. And then God says, I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. You will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. This incredible blessing. So the next point in the story is that we learn in verse 1 that God appeared to Abram in Ur, and Abram, was delayed. And then here's like kind of the high point of the climax here. We're getting right close to it. There's kind of two pieces here. Now verses 2 through 3, we get the blessing, right? This blessing that God has promised, which is amazing. And then in verse 4, we get the response, right? And here we get the highest density of lessons for us. We'll come back through for the lessons. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, right? What's the response? What's the response to this? So Abram went. Because of the promise, Abram went. The response was faith. Some God, not the moon God, came up to Abram and made this promise. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. You will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. all peoples on the earth will be blessed through you. This is simultaneously great and vague. God, what are you going to do here? Right? And Abraham believes God enough to go all the way to Canaan. And Lot goes with him, right? So Lot can either go back to Ur and live with Nahor, right? But instead he doesn't do that. He doesn't go back to Ur, doesn't go back to Nahor. He follows Abram all the way to Canaan. So Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they'd accumulated, everything, and set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. So we see in this blessing and response, we see all of the difficulty, right, of earthly ties. And then, kind of, that last piece there was that he arrives. That's verse 5. Verse 5, arrives in Canaan. And they arrive there. And then God begins to interact with Abram in some cool ways now that he's arrived in Canaan. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree Morah at Shechem. Now remember that Shechem's going to come up a lot in the rest of Israel's history. And then there's this little editorial note. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land, and which means that at some point somebody else goes through this and edits this and is adding these sorts of details. Ezra, we know, did at least some of that, right? But anyways, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." This is a big deal. Up here, he hasn't promised specifically how he's going to make Abram into a great nation. How is this going to happen? And now he tells him, "I will give your offspring this land." Now it's important to remember that offspring here is singular, not plural. So, I will give to your single offspring this land. Abraham now knows that he is going to have a child. So, he built there to the Lord who had appeared to him. So, he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. So, he arrives in Canaan. And then verse 6, God promises a child. And then verse 7, Abram worships. So we see like this growing over here. What happens in this section is that it becomes difficult to stay faithful, difficult to obey God. It reaches kind of its climax in the death of his father. And we see that with the blessing, Abram responds faithfully. And then we see Abraham begin to walk with God on the falling of this kind of story arc. And then in verse 8, the next thing, he went on there towards the hills of Bethel, pitched his tent. Remember that Abraham never buys a home. He just is always living in tents. And Ai on the east. And there he built another altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. So now in verse 8, he's worshiping in Canaan. And he's not worshiping the God of the Chaldeans, and he's not worshiping the God of the Canaanites. He's worshiping the one true Lord, Yahweh. And we know that because when it says here that he's calling on the name of the Lord, that he is really praying to and speaking to and talking to and worshiping Yahweh, God of Israel. Okay, so there he built an altar to the Lord called, just small detail here, notice that the only thing that he ever builds is altars, which is really cool. And then at the end, Abraham sets out towards the Negev. And so this is a big deal because Negev is really south of Canaan. And so we begin to see now at the end, the tension begin to kind of pick back up. As he goes to the Negev, it's kind of like, why is Abram getting away from the promised land? He keeps getting further and further out of Canaan, not further and further into Canaan. We kind of feel the tension beginning to build again, which is how it works. So that's the story. And as you look at it, you get little lessons along the way. So verse 27, we're just getting the background on Terah. And what we see from there is that Abram is just another random person living on earth. He's not special, and neither is Terah. They're just regular people living in Ur. In 1128, we see that Haran dies, and we feel the tragedy of a father losing his son, of a brother losing his brother, and that kind of begins to explain the relationship with Lot. In 1130, we see that Abram's life is quite difficult because his wife is barren. She has no kids. She can't conceive, and so now there's 70-year-old, no kid, and that also explains this relationship with Lot. And then in verse 31, they leave for Canaan. We ask the question why, and we discover that Abram was spoken to by God while he still lived in Ur. And so dad goes with him, but not super far. And so now we get in here, we have the tension of earthly ties, right? We see that playing out in Abram's life. And there is a process here by which God is beginning to rid Abraham of his earthly ties one by one by one. And Abraham is learning to live fully with God. And in this way, it is very much like how Jesus calls his disciples. Andrew, Peter, James, and John had known Jesus in Galilee, had been disciples of John the Baptist. And one day when he finally comes to Capernaum and he says, "Follow me," they follow him. The blessing and the response will make you fishers of men, and they respond with the yes, right? And so at the peak of this, we see that the highest tension of earth and heaven, and we see Abram follow God. And then in the falling action, we watch as he lives with God. And there is worship here, but guess what's missing? The blessing. He's not receiving the things promised. And we can see, even in this falling action, that the tension is beginning to mount again because promises haven't yet been fulfilled, and he's getting further and further from the promised land. So all throughout the story, there are lessons for us to learn. All throughout the story, there's details for us to notice. And as we continue to study narrative, as we go through the books of Genesis, and Daniel, which will take us all the way to September, we will study the Bible using just a little story arc and watching as the details build, watching as the climax comes, and learning to see the lessons in the story. So life group leaders, you can go through this video with your life groups. We study this sort of text differently than we study like a New Testament epistle. And so this would just kind of be my encouragement to you. So now in your own handouts, what you're going to do is you write in your own verses. You write in your own points for how the story builds. You write in where you think the climax of the story is. And you tell your friends and your brothers and sisters in the faith where the lessons are. God bless you. And I hope you enjoy this. For me, this is a lot of fun. And it's definitely how I have learned and now enjoy unpacking the narratives in God's Word.